Hey, so I'm Corey Pressman from Exprima Media. Hi. We've hired, okay, we got it, all right. Hola. So Exprima Media is a small production shop in Portland, Oregon, and I started the company after teaching college for 12 years and got pulled into the academic publishing world as a digital consultant and then eventually started this production company. So I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle than most of y'all who are speaking, so hopefully that's helpful. Although after this morning I see I'm actually reiterating a lot of what people had said, but that's what you get, man. So we're designers mostly. We're interaction designers. That's where we really geek out. We don't have engineering in-house because engineers are strange, expensive to keep and feed people. So no offense, everybody. So hi. Start over again after that. Damn. So anyway, so we have partnerships with engineers, and we do designing in-house, and we're interfacing with the textbook publishing industry and in publishing in general now. And so we're sort of driven by what our clients want, which is interesting. So we're kind of seeing what publishers are asking for. And what publishers are asking for now is a lot of our advice on what they should do next and how we should think about their content. So I've been formulating a lot of opinions just based on that. So that's what I'm going to force feed you today. And we started out making CD-ROMs, like a lot of people had mentioned in here, about 5 or 6 years ago, which is like 2 million dog years in tech time. And those discs would come in the backs of books, and that's what we were doing. And now the sock is like totally inside out now. You dig that? And that sock, right? It's a clean sock, but it's inside out now. And now it's not about putting discs in the backs of books, but taking books and putting them into digital format and letting them fly and be free. Hopefully. So one thing I've come to in dealing with this and talking to the clients and thinking about book content is this conclusion that I've made, is that ultimately this is not a book. When we get this content onto new platforms, it's not helpful to us when we're as designers and as interaction designers to think about it as a book anymore. Calling it an e-book almost, in my mind, does a disservice to the interaction and interaction design possibilities. So it's cutting semantic hairs, but that's what we're here to do. So when you wind up thinking about things too much, you wind up delving into French scholarship about things. And this is one of the books that I've been really grooving on. Has anyone ever heard of this thing? It's a super groovy little book called The Order of Books by Roger Chartier. Really excellent stuff he says in here. And he wrote this in the 90s, and it has really interesting sections like communities of readers. Sound cool? Social reader guy, Bill? Right? I was like, wow, that's awesome. And he has, I think, libraries without walls. So he says a lot of cool stuff in here. And some of the things he says I find to be really prescient to what we're doing. So I'm just going to quote them wholesale. So, whatever they may do, authors do not write books. Books are not written at all. They are manufactured by scribes and artisans, by mechanics and other engineers, and by printing presses and other machines. So do you dig what's going on there? Right? That it's not, the authors don't write books. What do authors write then? Let's call it stuff. All right? They just write stuff. I mean, content, we could call it, right? They generate content. But the delivery of that as a book is a specific hardware platform. And it's one that involves, at best, artisans with leather and string. And I guess at worst would be factories. You get the idea. So therefore, there's no comprehension of any written piece that does not at least in part depend upon the forms in which it reaches the reader. Whoa. Yeah? So taking content, making a book out of it, generates meaning for that content. It makes it a book. And books require certain kinds of interaction protocols. They require certain kinds of behaviors and social behaviors and reactions to them, etc. But the lesson here that he's making in the 90s, before it really became relevant, is that content does not equal the experience. Yeah? So authors write content, but the experience is generated by who? By what again? Right, by artisans and factories and all that stuff. The people who actually create the books create that experience. The text doesn't equal the object. The object is something else. And the space between the content and its generation and the experience of the content, that's where the meaning is constructed. That's where the content becomes a book. That's where that young woman's tweets became a book. And that was a very painful process, it sounds like. And a part of the struggle, where is she? Is that who I'm looking at? Hey, so I think part of the struggle you were having was just that it was entering a whole new form of meaning. Just agree so I can keep going. Right? There was a whole new form of meaning going on. There weren't tweets anymore. Tweets meant one thing. Book means something else. So there's meaning constructed here. So in a way, when we start taking this content and delivering it in specifically non-book contexts or non-book platforms, that we're talking about something that's post-book, not e-book. And I don't want to, I mean, I've shown this post-book slide to people and have like people get up and leave and they freak out, mostly, I won't say who. But I don't mean that books are over, books are dead, and that's the end of that. But obviously, we're on to something else. And by calling them ebooks, I think we're kind of limiting ourselves. And by just focusing on the bookish, how bookish we can make the platform, cuts us short of what can possibly be done. If we start thinking about the content in a post-book way, it really opens things up. I was going to read you this Helpring quote, but I won't. It's too inflammatory. So there's some worry about thinking about things post-book, and there's some worry in general about ebooks. There's a lot of anxiety out there in general, and I don't think that thinking about things post-book means that books are dead forever. It's sort of, what's on this slide? You know what that is on the right? Was that the left? On that side? On the far side over there, and on the close side over here, is e-ink, and that's how e-ink works, and that's an amazing thing. When e-ink came out, it was sort of, to me, the beginning of a huge change in civilization. And I don't think e-ink is going to replace books. I don't think that's Latin for, will this kill that? Will this replace that? That's from Victor Hugo's Notre Dame book, in which an architect who builds cathedrals points out a pile of printed books, referring to the printing press and its magic, and saying this will replace that, and he points at the cathedral. And he's saying, so that books now, that everyone's going to have a book, and women and children, dogs and cats living together, it's going to be the end of religion and civilization, and it's all over. We're sort of in a post-cathedral world. And was he right? Actually, I have yes and no in my notes, so either way, yeah. He was right in a way. There was an enormous paradigm shift, and things changed, huge sociocultural ramifications. But at the same time, all that stuff still exists. We're not in a radically different world. So, well, we are, but we're not. Hey. So, it's not like post-book means the end of books and we can burn all the paper. So there are some implications to what I'm calling the post-book era for a number of groups of people. I, of course, think of designers and I think of publishers. I think libraries also have a huge implication, but I can't really wrap my head around that just yet. But to find out those ramifications for designers and publishers, I want to just briefly go through a history of books, the issues that happened there, and how that relates to the digital revolution, if you will, that's going on. Paper books themselves went through 3 revolutions, I'd say. And this part of the talk is called Electric Incunabula. I think that was the whole title for my talk, ultimately. But I hate titling. I just want to call it like the talk that I happen to have stopped at hours before the conference. All right. If anything, I'd call this is not a book. So books started in the Scribal Era, in which they were being scribed and handwritten, and they're gorgeous things, are they not? They're gorgeous things, are they not? Right? You picture tons of monks writing those out. It's very Monty Python, and they're writing them all the time. And books were very rare, very precious, and very mostly biblical. And then after that, of course, you get the invention of the printing press, which did change things forever. And that was sort of a technological revolution, a shift of technology from going from scribal to printed. But interestingly, the earliest printed books looked like what? What does that look like? The far one there, the near one here. It looks like a scribed book, right? It looks scribal. The very first printed books look just like scribal books. Why? Oh, because people are sheep, right? Because they just want, hey, okay, well, you got a printing press, then let's print all these scribed things. That's beautiful. That's what the market was expecting. They needed to have some new interaction design protocols for the new platform, but no one had ever heard of that kind of stuff yet. So they're just like, this is great. Now monks can do other things. And people, actually, there was a huge resistance to this. It was a revolution, so there were people saying monks were going to become less monkish. It was going to destroy society if you were spreading books all over the place, and monkishness has changed, by the way, forever. But if you look also at the near one here, the far one there, you see that it looks bookish, but it's not completely recognizable yet. And it took hundreds of years, 150 years, if not more, for books to start to evolve. And in that evolving period, the books were called Incunabula. Say it, feels really good. Say it. Say it. Very nice. You win a free copy of this book. Hope you have a long flight coming up. So Incunabulae it's Latin for cradle. So these were like little baby books. They're not books yet. They're almost books. But you see an evolving of form going on here. You see that there's a table of contents, which isn't something monks were busy doing. There are paragraph markers. There are images inset inside things. It's starting to look like a book. You'll notice how funky it says the contents. Right? So they're still getting around the whole flow thing. But CSS was very, very young at the time. Actually, it was just C. That's all they had. They just had cascading. I don't know. Busted. So the Incunabula eventually evolves, and you get by the 1550s, books kind of look like books, and that was that. This is very, and you can see the revolution from the scribal piece to this piece. A couple hundred years, but the scribal piece looks like this artifact you'd pay a lot of money for and put on your wall, and oh my goodness, someone made that. That's crazy. It took a lifetime. It's nuts. And this is like, oh yeah, it's a book. You see that on the street and just like kick it to the side. It's a very recognizable, mundane artifact. But there's some revolutionary stuff in there. There's a chapter heading. There's the idea of chapters. There's subheadings. There's a footnote. There's paragraphs. There's spaces between the words. It's intense stuff. There's a picture with a description. So basically, books became what they are now. And in geek terms, what actually happened, of course, was that there was the invention of interaction design protocols for a new platform. But how long did it take? Hundreds of years, right? And interestingly, I think maybe we're in a similar spot now. Just to review the Incunabula period, or the history of the P book, if you will. I hate that phrase. I don't know why I just used that publicly. I take that back. We can edit that out. This isn't being streamed live, is it? There, it's gone. So it went through a technological revolution where it went from scribal to printed, and then it went through a formal revolution in which the forms changed from incunabulic to book, yeah, the form of the content itself, and then it went through something I don't even have nearly enough time to groove on, which is the cultural ramifications of what happened, the sociological changes. It created the world we live in. This did destroy that in a lot of many ways. So, and you could all groove on that. I don't think that's like a whole college course, I think. The effects of the book on society. 101. So, my God, where are we now? If you go back, let's just go back for a second into these things. Have we had a technological revolution? Someone say yes, please. The wrong room for a pause there. And now there's a formal revolution afoot. But man, it's happening way too slow for me. It's too slow for me because it's happening too slow for my clients too. I think that I'm in the right place. I'm so happy to be with you all because when I'm out there in the wild, people are just not doing the kind of groovy work you guys are doing. So I'm really preaching to the choir. So hopefully we can sing later. But if you look at right away, what came out right away in the textbook market was CourseSmart's app for textbooks. And this is what I got. What is this? It's a PDF. Who said that? Oy vey schmear. It's a PDF on the iPhone. So that's what. And if you want to get really fancy, what is that really? It's an Incunabula, right? It's nascent. It's not an ebook. It's not an ebook thing. Things have changed since then in a lot of other places, but not in textbooks, interestingly. But we have some potential here to do things right because there is such a thing as interaction design. And I know what I'm hearing in this room now is all the good back-end codey stuff that's happening, which makes me very happy that EPUB has capabilities, HTML and CSS. All these things have capabilities to get us post-Incunabula. But I also see that we need new interaction design protocols for these new delivery systems. And if interaction design, I think user-centered interaction design is going to save the world. Interaction design is, let's go with Cooper's, because we're in San Francisco. The practice of designing interactive products, environments, systems, and services. Interaction design is the creation of a dialogue between a person and a product, a service and a system. So this is, this is what needs to happen. We need to come up with these protocols and just ways of doing it. And I think one of the groups of people that need to do it are publishers. And there's a lot of anxiety in the world that publishing is going to end, that it's the end of the world for publishers. But I don't think that's the case. I think publishing started relatively early in the entire history of civilization, that we're right after the beginning of publishing, and publishing will be around for a very long time if they follow my advice. Publishers generally take content and get it to the user in an ingenious form. Usually they get content from the user, they make a book, and they create a market for it. And what they do is they've somehow disintermediated themselves in the production of the book itself, because the book is plateaued for hundreds of years, yeah? It's paper and typesetting and all that stuff, so they get vendors to do all of that stuff. But now the world is disintermediating around them, just to use that word as much as possible. So that now there are people who can go circumvent publishers altogether. We have authors coming to Exprima to have us make apps for them. They're not even thinking about publishers. You could be an author and go straight to your audience via blogs or via your own platform. So what I'm advocating for publishers in particular is that they become better curators of their content and get involved in the R&D of these new platforms, to partner with interaction designers to come up with the post-book, post-incunabulic stuff themselves. Why involve publishers? Because they have so much content. Especially my textbook clients, they're sitting on one of the largest collections of educational content ever seen. So I don't want them just to go away, I want them to play, but I don't want them to keep vendoring out all of these things and let third-party companies come up with the solutions. I think they have a real possibility here of recapturing that market and become better digital curators. And the digital curation folks out of England, a very similar organization to this one, although they don't archive Grateful Dead shows, which you guys do. Thank you. And you archive bathrooms, it seems. That's a very old bathroom. But the digital curation group is interested in maintaining and adding value to a trusted body of digital information for current and future use. So it's not just maintaining the digital content. What's that second part? Adding value, right. And adding value isn't just flowing it so it looks like a book onto a page or an app that you flip, and look, the pages look like they're flipping. It's a book. It's an incunabula, so let's get past that together. And we have something to learn here from the librarians. There are actually 5 laws of library science. Did you know that? You did? I'm sure, well, the librarians here did know that. Some of my best friends are librarians, so watch what you're saying. But books are for use. Every reader has his or her book. I had to insert the her, because it turns out there are women everywhere. So you got to include them now. They didn't used to be, evidently, but now they're all over the place. Every book its reader, save the time of the reader. This is heavy stuff. The library is a growing organism. And this is about, an architectural joint. It's about a place with a purpose. But if you take those and make them about curating experiences, curating content, and the experience of that content, you can come up with these kinds of groovy laws. Like media are for use. Every user, his or her information. Every interface, its user. Value the time of the user. These are like interaction design, calls to action. Content is a growing organism. And it's that it's a growing organism means we need to get on top of it now and get post-book and post-incunabulic immediately. Thank you very much.